Okay, so here we are. This is the second lecture in Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is on growth. And I've got an article for you in today's Wall Street Journal. This time it's in the finance section. There's an article here that says, ending the 500 euro note opposed. So the point here is that why are some countries thinking of eliminating the high denomination bills, currency? Well, the answer is the negative interest rates. So what is the plan or the reason to bring about low interest rates? The plan is that if we can bring about low interest rates, then people will borrow more money, they will spend more, and that will stimulate demand and stimulate employment and growth. Now, is that an Austrian view or a Keynesian view?
Austrian. That sounds like Austrian.
No, that's Keynesian. See, remember, the whole idea behind Keynes is that as long as we can manage demand, we can manage the economy. So what is the purpose of the low interest rates? So people will borrow more, right, to stimulate what? To stimulate demand. See, it's a Keynesian thing, to stimulate demand, and with an increase in demand, this will bring about more growth and more jobs, according to the Keynesian way of thinking. But notice here that we have a plan. Now, how do we bring about low interest rates? Well, one way is through quantitative easing. So what is quantitative easing? Quantitative easing is when the monetary authorities create money, and then that money goes into circulation. So when anything becomes more plentiful, you see, relative to demand, then the price goes down, or in this case the value goes down. So for example, if dollar bills were so plentiful that you and I could go out and just scoop them off the ground like leaves off from the trees, then how much value would each dollar have? It would be, because it's much less scarce, it would have almost no value, or perhaps no value, correct? I mean, if dollars were that easy to come by, then the value of each one would be almost worthless. And that's the whole idea behind that's one fact of quantitative easing. We increase the money supply by creating money out of thin air. Monetary authorities can do that. And this will make more money available. So the price of money, which is what? Interest is the price that we pay for money, goes down. Now, there are other ways to lower interest rates using monetary policies that I'm not going to go into because that's for another chapter. But the point here is that the plan is to lower interest rates. All right? And there are different ways that, like I just explained, that we can do that. All right? Now, now here's the catch. With negative interest rates, people are reluctant to put their money into banks, correct? See, what a negative interest rate is that if you put your money in the bank, then you've got to pay the bank to keep your money. It's the reverse of earning interest. Essentially, you're paying the bank interest instead of receiving interest from the bank. All right? So with negative interest rates, more people will start hoarding their money. So again, this is a plan, right? And according to Frederick Hayek and The Road to Serfdom, once we have a plan, in order for that plan to work, what's necessary? Everyone has to cooperate in the plan. And therefore, you have to force people to cooperate. So in this case, what's one way of encouraging people not to hoard their money? Because the whole point is we want them to spend it because again, increased demand, increased jobs and growth. That's what we want through the negative interest rates. But if people are hoarding their money, then that defeats our purpose. So what do? Well, in order to encourage people to participate in the plan, we eliminate high denomination bills, which make it more difficult for people to put their money in a mattress or save their money. Because when people are saving their money, they're not doing so in a bank. I mean, it's better off. I mean, if you have $1,000, is it better off to put it in the bank and then pay the bank to keep your money, or just put it in your mattress? It's better to put it in your mattress, right?
Yeah.
So with more people doing that, well, what we are going to eliminate high denomination bills, which could be the first step in eliminating currency, period. Now, what is the danger to you personally of the government eliminating currency? In other words, if we eliminate currency, the only way that you can buy things is through the bank. It would have to be virtual, because there's no currency, so any transaction would have to be through the banking system. So what's the danger in that?
The bank could shut down.
Well, the bank could shut down, and that would be, that's right. I mean, the whole system could shut down. But it also could lead to a loss of personal freedom. See, this is what Hayek was talking about. He says that with a planned economy, this could lead to a loss of freedom, loss of personal freedoms. Well, how can eliminating currency and going to a virtual system be danger of losing personal freedom? Because if everything that we do is virtual and everything we do is through the banking system, then if we don't cooperate with the authorities, what can the authorities do?
Turn it off.
Shut your bank down.
Yeah, well, turn your account off anyway,
Exactly.
so that you couldn't use your account in terms of buying anything.
So aren't we already there?
Well, some people think we're moving in that direction.
They're trying to eliminate the $100 bill.
Yeah, well, that's the beginning. In America, it would be the $100 bill. See, in Europe, it's the 500 euro note, which is a very high denomination bill.
Which isn't the $100 bill like 75% of like all money is like the $100 bill?
Well, I don't know about that, but there are some statistics here. It says
I think with the euro, with the $500 dollar note bill, that makes more sense, because that is like excessive, whereas like $100 is not that excessive.
well, all this is speculation. I mean, we haven't eliminated the $100 bill. There's this talk about, some people are talking, and we seem to be perhaps moving in that direction. So, nothing is concrete yet. We're simply, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to illustrate the Austrian and way of thinking, or the point behind Frederick Hayek's book, The Road to Serfdom. All right. It does say here that says here along those lines, about 4/5 of consumer transactions in Germany are made in cash, compared with about half of all U.S. So according to this, about half the transactions in the United States is virtual and half is with currency. So anyway, then it says, the next article here says debt is swelling at Chinese firms, and see, another byproduct of quantitative easing and low interest rates is that this is encouraging more people to borrow money. Of course, that's the whole purpose of the very low interest rates. But what's the danger in that? Well, the danger in that is if people can borrow huge amounts of money at very low interest rates, then they'll be willing to take more risks. See, that the point here is that there's investors who are going very deep in debt because of the low interest rates. you can borrow money at a very low interest rate, even negative interest rate, make investments with it, like in the bond market, and you can, if things go right, you can make a whole lot of money. But what this is doing is that it's encouraging an increase in debt, both the United States and the rest of the world. Now, what's the problem with debt? Well, the problem with debt is that once things start to head south economically, then the more debt you have, the more dominoes effect you have. If person A has got high debt, and especially if it's in high-risk ventures, and the economy starts to head south, you get more unemployment, slower growth, which is the subject of this chapter. We get slower growth. Then what happens? Well, those people can't make good on their debts, so they default, and so other people don't receive, and they end up defaulting, and so the whole thing becomes a dominoes. Person A can't pay person B can't pay person C can't pay D, and the whole system eventually collapses.
Now, is bank cards and credit cards put into that statistics too?
Statistics of debt?
Yeah.
Well, credit cards certainly are. Now, bank cards, there's a big difference between a debit card and a credit card. A debit card is taken right out of it's not borrowing, it's taken out of your current bank account. But that includes credit card debt. It also includes student loan debt, of course. Yeah, Dimitri?
Would it be smarter to pull out a credit card and then buy stuff with a credit card and then pay it off with your debit account, with your checking account from your debit, instead of just buying stuff with your debit card? Isn't that smarter than to get credit?
Is it smarter to use your debit card than your credit card, if you can?
No, to use a credit card instead of a debit card.
Well, a credit card's safer. I mean, if you're buying like on the internet, a credit card is safer than a debit card.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people use credit cards, and of course, if you pay off your credit card every month and you don't pay any interest, so the safest thing is to have a credit card that you pay off every month.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
I don't know. I'm just looking towards building credit.
oh, building credit.
And
A credit card would be better there than a debit card.
You're not getting anything with a debit card. With the credit card, some of them offer rewards points or something like that.
Well,
So
that's the
sometimes
perk.
that-
Yeah, that's the perk with a lot of credit cards. Again, you gain if you pay it off every month.
Is there a certain fee or something for actually having a credit card?
Oh, well, it depends on the credit card. There are all kinds of different offerings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just have to shop around and do what's best, for you. Yeah. Okay. Well, any other questions before we get into the chapter? Did y'all find this interesting, by the way? I mean, this is should give you some food for thought in terms of what's happening in the world.
In the police state. Do you know that Virginia was banning cops' names from the public, or they're trying to, in the state of Virginia? Did you know that?
Policeman names, you mean?
Yeah. They're trying to keep it secretive from the public now.
Oh, I don't know.
I just heard this today. It was in Drudge Report.
The Drudge Report. That's a good. That's a good source of
Did you know
news.
that Donald Trump is coming into Radford?
Yeah.
Is he really?
Yeah, Donald Trump is coming into Radford Monday. Monday at noon. Anyway, I'm going to pick up where I left off last time. Now, the whole name of this chapter is growth, right? Now, what is the economic problem? We live in a world of scarce resources, right? And yet people have unlimited wants and needs. So how do we meet their needs in this world of scarcity? So we've talked about resources. We've talked about scarcity, and of course now we're talking about what brings about or what brings about more growth, and what are the hindrances to growth, which brings us to this particular slide. The first hindrance to growth I have up here is the rule of man dominates. Now, last time we talked about the difference between the rule of man and the rule of law. Now, remember the example I gave you last time? If you're driving down the highway and you're going, the speed limit's 35 and you're going 55, and the policeman stops you and gives you a ticket for going 20 miles over the speed limit, what is that? That is the rule of law, correct? The law says speed limit's 35, you're going 55, you're 20 miles over, and you're going to pay a fine according to what? According to the law. Okay, the other scenario was that the speed limit is let's say 35, and you're going 35, and the policeman stops you and says, I clocked you at 55 miles an hour, and I'm going to give you a ticket. Of course, this isn't common in the United States, but it is common in much of the rest of the world. And of course, what's the policeman looking for in this case? He's looking for a bribe. If you offer him a bribe, then perhaps, some money, then he may forget about the ticket. So what is that? Well, that's called the rule of man. See, the rule of man says whoever is in authority. Now, who's in authority in this situation? The person in authority is the policeman. So the policeman is using his authority to better himself, regardless of the law. That's what's called the rule of man. And I talked last time about where in some countries, where oftentimes it's who you know and what not what you know. In other words, in a free market system, who gets the loans? I mean, if you've got a system that's purely a free market system, then when investors and business people go to borrow money, well, there's not enough money for everybody. So who are we going to lend the money to? Well, we're going to lend the money to the people with the best credit rating, with the best business ideas, with the most capital, perhaps. In other words, we're going to lend money to people who's going to make good investments and who has a high probability of being able to pay the money back. Correct? Now that would be according to the rule of law. But what's the rule of man? Well, the rule of man says, well, all these people are coming to the bank to borrow money, but who gets the lion's share of the loans? Well, it could be the banker's relatives, or it could be people who offer the highest bribes. See, or it could be maybe a person who's a member of a favored group. So when banks lend money out, not according to the most creditworthy person, but according to whoever they favor, that's called the rule of man. And when money is lent out according to the rule of man, just because certain people are favored, then you're not going to get the most creditworthy. You're not going to get the investments that's going to best grow the economy. In fact, you're going to get a lot of shaky type investments. You're going to get a lot of fraud, and it's just simply not good in terms of building a strong, healthy economy. So that's what we mean by the rule of man dominates. When the rule of man dominates a system, see, I mean, if you ask me, what is a big reason why America has been so successful economically, I would say that, and on top of the list would be that Americans from our beginning have respected the rule of law. See, but unfortunately that is eroding somewhat, but still, compared to the rest of the world, Americans respect the law more than people in most other countries. I mean, how many of you have been stopped by a policeman who was just simply expecting a bribe? Well, I mean, I never have, and I don't know anyone else who ever has. But that's just an example of how Americans are conscious of the rule of law. And because of that, that's one reason why we've had a robust economic growth in the past. Excessive taxes would be a hindrance to growth. Especially, well, taxes, period, both personal and business. But as taxes increase or they become more lengthy, more complicated, this is a hindrance to growth. You know how many lawyers J.P. Morgan has that they've hired full-time just to handle government regulations and taxes? J.P. Morgan hires full-time 10,000 lawyers. Can you imagine that? And all they do is deal with government policies. Pretty amazing. Which is one reason why is big business in favor of more higher taxes and government regulation? Anybody know that? Why is big business actually in favor of higher taxes and more government regulations? Competition. In one word, that explains it. Competition. I mean, if J.P. Morgan has to hire 10,000 full-time lawyers just to keep within, to comply with government regulations, well, that's an enormous amount of resources. And smaller banks, and many of the laws that apply to big banks apply to small banks, but small banks don't have the deep pockets that big banks do. They can't afford to put so much resources into calculating their taxes and complying with government regulations, and therefore they can't thrive. Many of them go out of business, which is exactly what the big banks want. And same with big business. There's a big difference. You got to make a distinction in your mind between big business and little business. There's a huge difference. Okay. If you just say, well, I'm pro-business, well, are you pro-big business, big corporation, or little business? Because there's a big difference. So anyway, excessive taxes can be a deterrent to economic growth, because the more resources we put into government regulations and taxes, then the less resources we have to, build a better mousetrap. The less resources we have to grow a business, and therefore productivity suffers and growth suffers. Now, of course, taxes and regulations kind of go hand in hand. We've become well, later on I talk more about this, but there's a book that comes to mind when I talk about regulations, which we'll talk about later, but it's called The Rule of Nobody by Philip Howard. And he talks about how so many government regulations have made it almost impossible for us to make profitable investments. But I'm not going to go into that until later. And the large national debt. Our national debt, in the year 2000, our national debt was about 10 trillion, and today it's very close to 20 trillion. So since 2000, our national debt has almost doubled, and if I say 20, that sounds like a small number, but it's hard to visualize, and I do talk about it in the book how much $20 trillion is. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. So the more of our resources we have to put into the national debt, then the fewer of our resources we have to put into research and development and investing in business. So what is the key to growth? The key to growth is to increase productivity. which is what I'll explain next. Whoops, what did I do? Now, what did I do? Let's see. You know, if you push escape on the keyboard, that solves a whole lot of problems. I've learned that. So how can consumers buy things at reasonable prices? And we've talked about this before. Competition whereby lower cost will lead to lower prices and more profit. You know, a good example of this is Sam Walton and Walmart. Okay, you know, what made Sam Walton so successful in building Walmart? Because he sold the same things that so many other people were selling, but he was able to lower his costs. And after he lowered his costs, what did he do? He lowered his prices. And because he lowered his prices, he could sell more merchandise. And as he increased his volume, he increased his profits. See, the way it works in a free market system is that you lower. Let's say all of us were in the same industry, and let's say we're all producing widgets, which is an imaginary good. And let's say that it cost us we're all the same size, we all share the same part of the market, and it all cost us, let's say, $80 to make a widget. And we're all selling these widgets for $100. Now, do y'all get the picture? We're all in the same industry. You know, we're all business owners. We're in the same industry. We share the same part of the market, you know, an equal, you know, share of the market. All our costs are the same to make a widget, $80. We're all selling these widgets for $100. So we're making, all of us are making $20 per widget. Now, y'all get the picture? All right? All right, now let's say that you come along and you were able to lower your costs to $60. Now, right away, what's happened to your profits?
Increase.
Yeah, well, you've made more money, you know. And now instead of making $20 per widget, you're making $40 per widget, correct?
Yep.
But now, what would you do next to increase your profits even more?
Buy more.
Increase your price.
No, you lower your price. You lower your price. Let's say you lower your price to $80. Okay. Now you might say, well, okay, if I lower my price to $80 and it's costing you $60. Now remember, the rest of us, you know, the cost is still $80, right? But you've lowered your cost. You're the only one, but you've lowered your cost to $60. So you lower your price to $80. You might say, well, now you're still making only $20 per widget. But why would anyone buy from the rest of us if they could buy the same thing from you at a lower price? And what a lot of consumers are going to do is that they're going to start buying from you, correct? So even though you're still making only $20 per widget, you're going to increase your sales due to the lower prices, and you're going to greatly increase your profits. See, this is exactly what Sam Walton did with Walmart. All right? Now, where does that put the rest of us? Can the rest of us compete with you and lower our price to $80? No, we can't. Why? Because it's costing us $80 to make a widget, correct? And if it costs us $80 to make a widget and we lower our price to $80, are we going to make any money?
Nope.
No. See, the only reason you could lower your price is that you lowered your cost first. So where does that put the rest of us? Well, where that puts the rest of us is that either we hustle and we do what you did and we lower our costs to $80 or less, or we go out of business. See, those are only two choices. So some of us will go out of business because we're unable to lower our cost as well as others. But those of us who are able to lower our costs, you see, well, what we do in turn is we lower our price the way you did originally. And so what's the net result? Well, this is a win-win situation for almost everybody except perhaps those businesses that couldn't compete. But for everyone else, with the lower prices, the businesses make more money because they're selling more units. Businesses that were successfully able to lower their costs and then lowered their price. Because of the higher profits, those businesses can grow. Along with growth, just like Walmart grew, you can hire more people, so this generates more jobs. And with the more profits you're making, you are able, I don't say you will, but you're able to pay higher wages due to your higher profits. So you got more jobs, the possibility of higher wages, and with economic growth, the government receives more tax revenue. So it's a win-win situation for almost everybody. And this is how you grow an economy. Economic growth comes from investing, lowering costs, lowering prices, increased profits, more jobs, more tax revenue, and a larger economy. Okay? That's how you grow an economy. That's the formula for economic success. See, so what is productivity? The ratio of a specific measure of output to a specific measure of input. If we say that we've increased productivity, that means that for every input, we get multiple outputs. See, we put X amount of resources in, and we get a multiple of those resources back out. Outputs exceeds inputs. And that's what we mean by increasing productivity. Now remember, in an earlier lecture, I gave you an example of this, and I said, remember I said if an American business goes to Mexico and pays $2 to do a job, or they have to stay in America and pay $20 to do the same job, which is cheaper? And that's a trick question, because what am I leaving out of the question? I say, okay, you go to Mexico, you pay $2 an hour.
The shipping cost?
No. You stay in America and you pay $20 an hour. Now, what am I leaving out? Why is this not it's really it's an incomplete thought. Inputs and outputs. That's what we're talking about here, right? Inputs and outputs. See, it's not how much you pay a worker alone, but it's how much you pay a worker relative to how productive that worker is.
So the key to competition is productivity, meaning if you keep your resources, how you manage your resources very low, then your inputs, which is obviously your resources, are very low. Your outputs are going to be pretty high if you can manage that.
That would be an example of an increase in productivity. If your outputs are high and your inputs are lower, then by definition we've increased productivity. See, like in this case with the Mexican worker, if we pay a Mexican worker $2 an hour, but in an hour that Mexican worker can produce something that has a market value of $4, then for every $1 we pay, we get $2 back, correct? But if the American worker is more productive, and the American worker, let's say we pay American worker $20 an hour, but the American worker can produce something in an hour that has a market value of $100, then for every $1 we pay the American worker, we get $5 back. So would you rather go to Mexico and pay $2 and get 2 back for every dollar you spend or you invest? Or would you rather pay an American worker $20 an hour, but for every dollar you put in, you get 5 back? Now, which is the better deal? It's better to pay the American worker $20 and get $100 back rather than paying the Mexican worker $2 but only getting $4 back. So you have to, when you're looking at productivity, you've got to consider inputs and outputs.
So what would be an example of this concept in real life?
Well, okay, that's a good question. What would be an example? Let me just ask that in a little different way. What American businesses may profit by going to a country to take advantage of that country's low wages? And the answer is companies that are producing products that are labor intensive. Say, in the production process, we have labor, okay, and we have capital. Labor is just sheer grunt, human effort. Capital are things like, machines, buildings. We can include the infrastructure in terms of the communication system, the road system, and things like that, okay? So if you're producing something, you may be producing something that's very labor intensive, where you don't need much capital, but you need a lot of labor, or you might be producing something that is very capital intensive, that you don't need much labor, but you need a lot of capital. See, I mean, it just depends on what you're producing. Like take if you're how you say the textile business. Well, the textile business, of sewing clothes is a very labor-intensive business. So, and it's very low capital intensive. It's high labor, low capital. So, can that business, if it's an American business in the textile industry, can that business profit by going to a Bangladesh, for example, where you can pay someone $10 a month for doing the same thing, as an American worker would, and be just as productive because they're just working with a sewing machine? Can you benefit by going to Bangladesh, which is where most of our clothes are made, by the way? If you look at, if you trace, most companies, big brand name companies, manufacture their clothes there in Bangladesh. So if you're a textile business, then you could benefit by going to Bangladesh and pay the low wages. But if you're an American company and you're producing something that's very capital intensive, because America is a very advanced industrial country, then despite the low wages in foreign countries, it would probably benefit you profit-wise, productivity-wise, to stay in America.
But if they're both performing the same task, how does it?
Well, it depends what the task is. If the task is the sewing machine, then you're better off in Bangladesh. If the task is working with computers and something in the high-tech field, then you're better off in America or some other country that's well developed, like America. Everything else being equal here. See, when does productivity increase? And I've talked about this. Let's see, where are we? Let's see. When the units of output is more than units of input. That's what we mean by an increase in productivity. Another way to define productivity is that we can produce more per time period at a lower per unit price. That's another way of defining productivity, or an increase in productivity. How do we increase productivity? Produce more per unit of time and lower per unit cost. Okay, I just said that. How do we increase productivity? Through way of inventions and or innovations. An invention is a new machine or new tool. An innovation is a new way of doing things. So if we did away with machines, would more people have jobs? Now, that's interesting. I mean, if a machine can do the job of 100 people, I mean, if we have a machine and only one person can operate that machine, and that machine can do the work of 100 people, then some people believe that if we didn't have the machine, that 100 more people would have jobs. But it doesn't work that way. And I'll explain to you why. That's why you're here, right? To know why, how these things work.
I don't believe that, though.
Well, but it's the truth, and I'll show you how.
That's an opinion, kind of more of an opinion.
No, it's not opinion. It's just mathematics. So let me explain it first before you jump the gun and protest. Let me explain. All right, let's say that you live in a country and you got some land and you want a plot of your land, maybe a quarter of an acre or so, plowed up, so you could plant a big garden. All right, and but you don't have a tractor, but your neighbor has a tractor and a disc. So you go to your neighbor and you say, would you come over and would you till my my garden for me? And your neighbor says, sure. And you say, you come over and I'll pay you 20. Let's say that your neighbor can do this in an hour, with this tractor and disc. So you pay him $25. See, so your neighbor was willing to come over and do the work with his tractor for an hour. What did I say? $25 for, let's say $25. See, I'm taking this out of the top of my head. Let's say $25. All right, next year, you got this quarter acre of land that, once again, you want plowed up. So you go to your neighbor and you say, would you come on over and do what you did last year? Would you come over and, plow up my quarter of an acre? And your neighbor says, well, yeah, I'd love to. The only thing is I sold my tractor. But don't worry, I've got a shovel and a rake, and I'll come over and I'll do your garden for you. But now last year with my tractor, it took me an hour, but I figure that if I'm doing this with a shovel and a rake, it's going to take me maybe 40 hours. So your neighbor says, look, you give me $25. Last year you paid me $25 an hour, right? So you give me $25 an hour, and I'll come on over, and I'll put my 40 hours in, and we'll make it a deal. So now, what are you going to say? Are you going to pay someone $25 an hour for 40 hours just to plow up a quarter acre land to grow vegetables? With no effort, you could go out and buy a whole lot more vegetables a whole lot easier, right? For that amount of money. Whatever 40 times 25 is. And so you say, no, you have all wrong. Last year I wasn't paying you by the hour. I was paying you by the job. So you come on over with your shovel and a rake, and I'll give you work your 40 hours, and I'll give you $25. Now, what's your neighbor going to say? No way. In other words, without the tractor, there is no transaction. See, without the tractor, on the one hand, you're not going to pay your neighbor, thousands of dollars to do the job, and on the other hand, your neighbor's not going to work for pennies an hour. So, despite the fact that the tractor can do the job of maybe 100 people, the truth is that with the tractor, there's somebody's got a job, But without the tractor, no one has a job. And that's the way it works. See, people are paid. See, you are paid not because of your good looks, all right? But you are paid according to how productive you are. The more productive you are as a worker, the more you can get paid. The more you're worth. Well, what makes you productive? Well, part of your being productive may be hard work, but that's only a small part of it. See, the American worker is more productive than most workers of the world because of the infrastructure they work in. The American worker has a high degree of what we say human capital. Human capital is the knowledge and skills used to work with capital. And we are a country that's highly capitalized. So because of the high level of human capital and because of the high level of capital, the American worker is very productive, and therefore the American worker can be paid a high wage compared to people in other parts of the world that are not as productive as the American worker. Yeah.
Okay, but one thing doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so like you have a grocery store, okay, and you have workers, cashiers for the grocery store.
You got a grocery. Let me repeat this for over there. You have a grocery store, and you have a lot of. All right, go on.
You have cashiers that are checking people out. Say you have 5 of them or so for a small grocery store. I don't know, whatever. Okay, so then robotics machines come into place,
right?
And then everybody goes.
All right,
to the self-line.
That's very good. Let me make the next point because I know where you're going on this. So let me make that point. I'll answer you because that's an excellent point. I'm really glad you asked it. All right, now what he's saying is this. Let's say that we have 3 factories in the town. And each factory employs, let's say, 100 people, right? Now, let's say that each of these factories takes on labor-saving machinery, right? Machines that can do the job of multiple people. So each of those 3 factories, each of these 3 factories, they take on these machines and they lay off 50 people. So we got 150 people here losing their jobs. So what does it look like the machines are doing? It looks like the machines are replacing jobs. Now, what is the name of this course? Macroeconomics. It's not microeconomics. We're looking at the picture in the large. All right. Now, is it true that in this town, 150 people lost their jobs and those jobs may never come back? And is it not true that we could perhaps identify these 150 people? It's John Doe that lives on Fairlane. Has 3 children. He lost his job, and after 6 months, he's still unemployed. I mean, we can identify these people. These 150 people lost their jobs, and these jobs may never come back. But we're not looking at it. This is not microeconomics. We're not looking at it in terms of those 3 factories. We're looking at it in a macro sense. We're looking at it in the large. We're looking at it as a whole. See, why did these 3 businesses take on the machines? Because the machines could do at least the same amount of work at lower costs.
Well, they don't have to pay as many employees as well. They don't have to give money out of their pocket to pay employees because the machine's doing it for them, and all they had to do was buy the machine in one purchase.
Yeah, and that's another reason. Yeah. And in other words, what I'm saying is that these factories had an incentive to take on the machines, otherwise they wouldn't have done it, correct? Right? And the name of the game, as I just explained earlier, the name of the game in order to succeed economically in the business world is to lower your costs which what these 3 factories did. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken on the machines. If those machines did the same work but at a higher cost, well, there'd be no incentive to take on the machines. The incentive was that the machines lowered cost. So if businesses are taking on these labor-saving machines, and as a result, their costs are going down, what are they going to do next to increase their profits even more so? They're going to lower their prices. And in a macro sense, with businesses being able to do this, being able to take on machines, more machines, and lower their costs, they lower their prices, which means greater buying power for the average consumer, which means that people buy more, and business is going to sell more, and if they are able to sell more, they're going to hire more people. So take those 3 factories, you got 150 jobs lost, but you may have 150 jobs lost, but you might have 1,500 jobs generated as a result of this process in a macro sense. Why? Because the lower prices, due to the lower costs that the machines made possible, led to an increase in buying power and an increase in production and an increase in jobs. But let me explain it to you in another way, if I haven't convinced you. If I tell you it's raining outside, how do you know if I'm telling the truth or not?
Go look.
You go look, right? So let's do that. Is it true or not that companies that take on more machines or countries that automate more experience an increase in jobs more than other countries? Well, let's look around the world. Let's look out the window. If you look around the world, what countries have the most jobs and the highest paying jobs? Those countries that have automated, that brought on more and more machines, or those countries that have not automated and have stuck with just human labor? If you look around the world, it's those countries, those advanced industrial countries, that have attained a higher standard of living than others. It's like, take the difference between Japan and India at one time. At one time, India had what are called cottage industries, where a cottage industry is where, take the textile business, people would have looms in the back room of their homes, and then they would weave all day, and then at the end of a certain time period, they would take the cloth in to their employer for sale. But they worked at home as, alone on a loom, let's say. And that's called a cottage industry. Now, for many years ago, not today, but years ago, it's quite, the opposite today, but years ago, the Indian government thought that, well, if we automate in terms of these weaving machines, a lot of these people in this cottage industry are going to lose their jobs. So they passed laws against automation. All right, now let's look at Japan. Japan, at the same time, took the opposite viewpoint. Japan said that the more machines they take on, the more they automate, the more they innovate, then they're going to be able to make better cloth, because a machine can do things that may not be possible just by hand. So Japan said, okay, yeah, he told me he had to leave early, so I do appreciate that. So Japan said, let's automate. Through automation, we can do things that's not really possible, but with just human labor. We can lower our costs, and then we can lower our prices. All right, now let's take America. Here, I talked about India, talked about Japan. Now let's take American consumers. We're interested in buying the best cloth at the lowest possible price worldwide. We look at Japan, we look at India. Japan's cloth is not as high quality and is a much higher price. Japan, higher quality, more variety, lower price. Who do we buy from? We buy from Japan. With more and more of the world buying from Japan, money flows into Japan, profits go up, and they get more jobs and more growth. In India, the opposite's true. Because of the high prices, fewer people buy from India, less money comes into India, and they get more unemployment. So who's benefited from this? It's the countries who have automated. See, automation, the truth is, the more machines that a country brings in, then the more jobs there will be. Now, let me take it one step further. There's a difference, because this may answer your next question, we'll see. There's a difference between the type of job gained and the type of job lost. Now, because of automation, what kind of jobs are lost by and large? Well, the kind of jobs that are lost by and large are labor-intensive jobs, low-skilled type jobs. These tend to be the kind of jobs that machines replace. All right. But what kind of jobs are generated as a result of automation and more advanced technology? More highly skilled type jobs. So automation brings about more jobs, but the jobs that it makes possible require a higher level of skill and education than was the case before. See, this is why it's more important for you to be in college than it was for your parents, or certainly your grandparents. Talk about your grandparents. In your grandparents' day, you could graduate from high school, you could go to work for some maybe business, a corporation or whatnot, and you could work very hard, work your way up, and then after several years, you could work your way into a high-level job and do quite well. Well, that's possible today, but it's not as possible as it was in your grandfather's day, because today, even entry-level jobs require a higher level of education and skills. And that's why it's more important for you to be in college, if you're going to do well economically, than it was for your grandparents, or maybe even your parents. You see what I mean? So yes, automation does generate more jobs than it replaces, but the kind of jobs require a higher level of skill. So what we can get through automation is called structural unemployment. So in other words, I said that automation generates more jobs than it replaces. Did I say that because of automation, more people will be working? I didn't say that. I said that automation makes possible more jobs. But it's possible that because the jobs that automation generates require a higher level of skill and knowledge, maybe the population is not keeping up with the advancements in technology. In other words, can we generate a job but not have a person skilled enough to fill the job? And the answer is yes. And when that happens, we call that structural unemployment. Now, what is the solution to structural unemployment due to automation? The answer is education. See, why is it that you're taking this course, you can transfer to any school, any university as principles of economics credit, and you're paying a third for this course than you would if you took it at Tech or Radford? Why is that? Well, one reason that's the case is that your tuition is more highly subsidized by the state than tuitions at four-year schools. And how come that is? See, if you all had to pay the full price of your education, most of you wouldn't be here. See, the cost of your education. I mean, you might think you're paying, you're paying for your education and you're paying for a part of it, but the state is bearing most of the cost of your education. And why is that? Why is your education subsidized? Because that's the answer to structural unemployment that automation generates. The answer is to help people through subsidizing of tuitions and in other ways for grants, offer grants and other means to help students, to encourage more students, to subsidize them, to offer them grants so that they can come to a college to acquire the skills, what we call human capital, to acquire the skills, which then when they graduate, they are skilled enough and knowledgeable enough to fill one of these high-tech jobs that automation generates.
And so you say the state subsidized, they pay for the higher cost, so it makes it cheaper for us to...
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what about the colleges that they have now? So they say that they only in certain areas or in certain kind of pocketed that the 2 years is actually free for those people. So they can go to a community college for those 2 years completely free, as compared to other community colleges.
Well, like in California, I mean, it is very often a state thing. For years, college education in California was free for students. I mean, the state paid all of it. I mean, the only difference between California paying all the cost of your education and being in Virginia is that the state pays a part of your education. Not all of it. But these are just political decisions. I mean, there's Bernie Sanders, for example. I mean, if he gets elected president, well, he's promised free college for everybody. So I mean, that's just a political decision. We can remember economics. Economics determines what is produced and how it's produced. But politics determines who gets what and how much.
You say that, but can you do it? Yeah, I got your politics.
Well, that depends. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Getting back to that machine thing.
The machine thing, yeah.
What's your personal opinion on having more machines? Do you think it's better for the world to have
Well,
more
of course,
machines?
yeah. The more
But
machines.
isn't that going to just create more pollution, though? Where does that?
Well, now pollution. Now you're off into something else. See
That's
what?
health of the-
Well,
health of
the topic here is productivity. I mean, let's stick to the topic. What we're talking about here is economic growth.
But health has to fall into it.
Well, yeah, but that's another topic. We can talk about that later
Okay.
when we're talking about that topic. But right now, I mean, the name of this chapter is growth.
Do things without thinking about the health? Is that what people do?
Well, no, but what I'm talking about here is what brings about growth. Let's stick to the
Putting
topic.
on machines and not thinking about the radiation it's going to give off.
But that's another topic. There's a place for that. There's a place for that in a later chapter.
How is it better? How is it better to have more machines replacing people?
Because we get more jobs, higher paying jobs, and better
The more
jobs.
machinery that comes out, the less jobs that people have.
No, the more jobs people have. That's what I've been explaining.
Okay, but how does that work?
Because the more machines you have, the more machines we have, the lower costs are. The lower we can lower costs, the more we can lower prices. The lower prices means to more buying power. You and I buy more, business can sell more, and therefore they need to hire more workers.
Does it hit a point of no return where there's all the machines that are needed are created and pretty much all the product of the market is flooded with cheap products and everyone can get to the point where
Well, there are some That has not happened yet in the world.
The true surplus of goods.
Well, you can have a surplus for other reasons, but not because of automation.
Yeah, but by the time you get
In fact,
and
in fact, it's the opposite. See, as long as we can lower costs, and because lower costs lead to lower prices, you are going to get economic growth, and because of that economic growth, you're going to get more jobs. Now, the jobs that you do get are going to require a higher level of skill and education, but you are going to get more of them. See, it's very simple. Lower costs. Now, remember, cost and price are two different things, right? Cost is a business term, price is a consumer term. We lower costs, there's a profit incentive to lower price. Lower prices means more buying power for the consumer. The consumer wants to buy more, business can sell more, they need more of everything. They need more machines, they need more raw materials, but they also need more workers. So for every machine we take on, we gain multiple jobs, although those jobs may require a higher level of skill and education. Yeah.
In turn, is a higher salary.
A higher.
You get more money for being more qualified for it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a high-skilled person can command a higher pay than a low-skilled person. Yeah.
Is purchasing power dependent on inflation of the money supply or
Yeah.
lower price?
Well, now we got a whole chapter coming up here. You bring in things that we got to stick to the program, but inflation is something else. But in a narrow sense, what we're saying here is that the more we automate, the lower prices will be. So we don't get inflation, we get deflation.
Right.
But inflation or even deflation can be bad if it's brought about through means other than what we're talking about. You can get inflation or deflation completely outside of the realm of productivity. But what we're talking about here in this chapter is what brings about economic growth. And what brings about economic growth, and this is true even in a command system, by the way. It's just not free enterprise. This principle is just an economic truth, regardless of the system. The fact is that lower costs lead to. This is what China's done. China is moving toward a more free system, but it's still more of a command system than we have. But yet, what have they done? Why is it that when we go shopping, most of the things that we buy are from China? Because China has done exactly what I'm talking about. They have invested in more machines and factories. They have lowered their costs as a result. They have lowered their prices as a result, and they can manufacture and sell merchandise for less than most American businesses. Why is it that when you go shopping that most of the things that we buy are produced in other countries?
Aren't they higher educated too?
Well, education is a part of it. Yeah, but it's the greater automation that necessitates greater education. All right, and the Chinese are highly educated as a group, and their level of education is it's very competitive, and they put a big emphasis on education. And so that is why, very few things that we buy as Americans are made in America. Even if it's an American company, remember, like Apple Computer, is an American company, but where, they have their production facilities in America?
No.
No, they have them in other countries. And that's what we're talking about here. See, when you look around the world, business, it's like I was talking about, example I gave was Japan and India. I mean, you got to look at the world as a competitive. You've got all these countries, and they're all competing against one another. Well, who is going to win the competition? Those that can lower their costs, lower their prices, hopefully improve the quality of their products, which is, again, made possible through greater automation. And those countries that can sell to the rest of the world the best products at the lowest possible price will grow, and other countries that can't play the game as well, that are selling products that are not as good at higher prices because their costs are higher, suffer because they don't export as much. So those people experience a low standard of living after a while, and countries that play the game better than others attain higher standard of living for the average person. Now, I say for the average person. Again, now that's a political thing. May not be for the average person. Depends on the politics of the country, but that's a different issue.
Isn't China's economy kind of like in the hole right now, though?
Yeah, the Chinese economy is suffering due to their increase in debt. See, the problem in China is that I've got a video that I'm going to show you coming up here, and it's about the 10. Well, there's probably more than 10, but the video shows you 10 ghost cities of China. Now, you know what the ghost cities of China are? Well, they're not abandoned. They've never been lived in.
Try to resettle folks.
Yeah. There are huge, and this video will walk you through these cities, but there are huge, and I'm talking about cities, huge cities with with huge buildings and parks and shopping malls. I mean, the most elaborate shopping malls on earth, and no one lives in them. No one has ever lived in them.
Why?
And well, that's a good question. Why? Because the government has built these cities, but the conditions are not that the people are able to move to the cities and to thrive. Now, I got someone from China here that's going to make a, huh? Well, I got the video. I mean, you can see it. It's the next chapter, or maybe a little later. But if you look under internet videos on our website, I've got a video. Or go to Google and just put in China ghost cities, and you'll see all kinds of YouTube videos on them.
I don't even know.
Yeah, we'll do that. Do that for next time. Just Google China ghost cities. Ghost is, Ghost.
I mean, do you think it could possibly be fake, though?
Well, you watch the videos and then ask me that. Yeah.
I also have a question pertaining to like the whole factor of moving big corporations to other countries. Wouldn't that really not help our economy, since like the taxation on those big businesses would kind of go to that country rather than our taxation on that big?
Well, yeah, that brings us to a whole other issue again. But that's a big factor. Yeah, absolutely. That's what inversion.
Another country then for us to keep them here.
Yeah.
We can tax them and the money will flow back into our economy.
Yeah, that's what. See, that brings us into a whole. I mean, I could talk for an hour on that. But there's two things that come to my mind when you mention that. One is inversions, and the other is the FATCA law. Now, inversions is when American companies buy a foreign company and then change their domicile to that foreign country so they can be obligated to the taxes of that foreign country rather than the American taxes. Now, that's called inversion. And FATCA stands for what does FATCA stand for? Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And what that is, it's a fairly new law. And what it does is that it's hard to explain in a few seconds, but it puts more. It makes it more difficult for Americans who live in a foreign country to I hate to say high, but it obligates them to abide by the American tax laws. Let's just say. I mean, it's hard for me to. We talk about FATCA in a later chapter, and we talk about inversions in a later chapter. See, all of these things we talk about, we just can't talk about it in one class period. And that's why I try to stick to the topic, because I mean, we could go and talk about everything, but we can't. We will eventually, but we can't do it all in one class period. Anyway, I don't know if I've convinced all of you about automation, but that is the way economics works.
I mean, I understand that aspect. I'm just saying, the taxation aspect. When you're talking about how, how a person can avoid the taxation, but we're talking about businesses. Like,
Yeah, businesses. See, you bring about a point here. See that businesses who are corporations who sell stock have an obligation to their stockholders, and a big part of that obligation is to be as productive as possible in order to compete with others, companies around the world. And what happens is that you've got some government policies that may try to force businesses to do things that are not favorable to stockholders, and so businesses are put in a bind. Do they follow the law and appease government, or do they take action to protect their stockholders? See, that's a big issue in America, a big issue. Anyway, it's time to go. I don't know about you, but I had fun. So I'll see you all next time. Now read chapter 4 for next time, okay? I'll see you all next time.
I'm not sure if everyone else got that.
Yeah, make sure that everyone